Hey, I'm Brian Goulet of the Goulet Pen Company and Ink Nouveau, and I have a new pen to introduce to you. It's called the Edison Pearlette. It's by the Edison Pen Company based in Milan, Ohio. From my good friend Brian Gray. We've done a lot of collaborative pens with him before and carry all of his production line pens. He has a new pen that he has taken from what was previously his signature line and brought it to the production line to make it available through all his retailers at a reduced price from what it used to be. It's called the Pearlette. It's a smaller pen than most of the other Edison pens, and it's one I think you're really going to enjoy learning more about. So here it is. This is the Edison Pearlette. Comes in your typical Edison box that you might recognize from some of the other pens that I've shown. It's like a faux alligator box. It's got the Edison logo in the back here. It's kind of nice, you know, it's a box. I don't really get too hung up on pen boxes, but what you really care about here is the pen. These are the three colors of the Edison Pearlette. There's a blue one called Deep Indigo Flake, a gold one called Aztec Gold Flake, and a violet flake, which is kind of like a burgundy wine color. These pens are made out of acrylic acetate, which is a cast resin. That's part of how you get that cool flaky material. Most pens are made with injection molding, which is a less expensive way to go about it, but you can't get that cool kind of flake design in it. The way they get the flake is to break up little chunks of the resin and then actually cast that into a bed, and then when you turn it on the lathe, you get that really cool kind of flaky material. The material of the Aztec Gold Flake especially reminds me, we did a limited edition Edison Nouveau Encore in a tortoise flake, and it looks pretty similar. It's not the same material, it's not quite as translucent as the tortoise, but it is pretty close. So I know a lot of people, when we ran out of these ones, were really disappointed, but the Aztec Gold Flake is pretty close. But you can see here that the actual pen size is pretty similar to the Encore. It's got the same size nib, it's got a identical clip to it as well. The Encore is a little more squared off, but the overall size is not drastically different. Some of the other Edison pens are a little more drastic, like the Collier, for example, is a much, much larger pen. And the Hudson as well is kind of a giant pen in comparison to this one. The Pearlette is one of the smaller pens in Edison's line. To compare it to some other pens that I have on hand here, here is a Pilot Metropolitan, which is actually pretty similar in diameter. It's just a little bit longer than the Pearlette, but pretty close. And then I've got a Lamy 2000 here. Lamy 2000 is pretty similar in diameter, but just a little bit longer. So that should help give you a comparison of the size. But what I really like about this one is the design of the body. It has kind of a continuous flow. It doesn't have a step from the cap to the body. So aesthetically, it's very pleasing, and it doesn't have a center band or anything, so it's kind of a minimalist design. The only thing it does have for ornamentation is the clip, which is also for function. It's a spring clip. It's got a pretty good amount of tension. It's not the most tension I've ever seen in a clip, but it's definitely not a weak clip either. It's got kind of these rounded finials here at the top and the bottom, a little bit of point to them. So it's a little bit, of a sleek pen, kind of like a cigar-shaped type pen. The threads on this pen are pretty shallow, so if you do end up holding it at the threads, it's not going to really inconvenience you too badly. And the threads are pretty small, pretty close together, so it's not very obtrusive. The one thing about the grip of this pen is that because it has kind of that continuous body, it's got a step from where the threads are up to the rest of the body. So if you have kind of large hands like I do, and you like to hold a little further back on the pen, depending on where your fingers might sit, it could be a little harder for you to adjust to that step, just depending on where your finger rests. That's kind of the compromise when you're looking at these pens with the continuous cap into the body. The nib itself is smaller. It's a number 5 nib, which is used on the Edison Nouveau Encore, but all of the other production Edisons have a number 6 nib, like I have on this Collier here. So the nib itself is smaller. It's going to write fairly similar to the other ones, except that when you're holding it, you're going to have to hold it a little further back than you would because the nib is not quite as long. It is postable. It's just push to post, so you just take the cap and put it on the back there. It's not a very heavy pen, so the weight does not change significantly whether you have it posted or not. Since it is a smaller pen, if you have large hands like I do, you know, the back of the pen kind of falls into the nook of my fingers there. So you may want to put the cap on there just to give yourself a little extra something to grab onto. It does have an engraving here. It's very subtle, but it says Edison Pen Co. and then Pearlette on it. If you don't like that, you know, I'm sorry, it comes on every pen, but it is very subtle. It stands out, you know, a little bit more on the blue one and then on the violet one as well, but it's not very obtrusive. The violet and the deep indigo flake have rhodium trim, and the Aztec gold flake has a yellow gold trim. So aesthetically, what Edison has done for the nib is to give the ones with the rhodium trim the all steel color, and then the Aztec gold has a two-tone nib to it. All of the pens are available in extra fine, fine, medium, and broad. As of the release, there are no stubs available because this is the number 5 size. If you want to get a stub, you're going to have to get it custom ground by Brian Gray himself. The way to fill the Pearlette is pretty easy. It's just like most other cartridge converter pens. You screw the body off at the grip, and I've got a bottle of Apache Sunset here, which seems to kind of match the ink, the Aztec Gold pretty well. So I've got my bottle of ink and I've got my converter. I want to screw the piston all the way down so that it goes to the bottom, and then I want to dip the nib all the way in the ink until it comes up onto the grip. And then I want to unscrew. It fills ink into the pen. You can screw down a little bit and screw back up if you really want to get a full filling. Then all you got to do is grab a paper towel, just wipe the excess off on the grip, screw the body back on, you're good to write. One neat feature about the Pearlette, and most of the Edison pens for that matter, is if you don't like the standard international converter capacity, it's about 0.5 milliliter, you can remove it and you can actually convert this pen to what's called an eyedropper, which is where you fill the entire body of the pen with ink. All you need is a little bit of silicone grease because the Edison's threads are machined very tightly. So just get a little silicone grease, kind of put that on your finger. Just smooth it on to the threads there. You don't need a ton, but you need enough to really kind of get in. This silicone grease is going to seal off the body of the pen from the grip so that no ink will leak out when you fill the whole body. Then you take your ink of choice in a syringe or an eyedropper or something that can allow you to get a fairly precise amount of ink into the grip. Then all I got to do is take and squirt the ink down in there. You want to get it up to about where the threads are going to start on the body of the pen. You're going to get a good several milliliters of ink here. And then all you got to do is just take and screw the pen together because you've already got the threads all sealed off there. Now you've got the entire body of the pen filled with ink. You let it sit for a minute for the ink to work its way through the feed, and you are good to write for a really, really long time. So once you have your Pearlette inked up, you can start writing with it. Now, it's available in extra fine, fine, medium, and broad. These are German-made nibs, so they're going to be a little bit broader than some of your Japanese counterparts, like Platinum, Sailor, Pilot. Those nibs, especially on the finer nibs, are going to be ground a little finer than these ones are. They tend to be, about like Lamy, if you're familiar with any of the Lamy nibs. And I do find that these nibs, these Edison number 5, the smaller ones on the Encore and the Pearlette, tend to be a little bit broader, especially in the upper sizes, than the number 6 nibs do in the Collier, Herald, Encore, or the Premier, than those ones. So, be a little bit aware of that. So I just you know, wrote one of my favorite verses here, and the flow here is very good. Now I have Noodler's Apache Sunset in here, which is a pretty smooth flowing ink anyway, but the nib here is going to be smooth with a hint of feedback. That's how Brian Gray likes to describe his nibs. So it's not going to be super glassy smooth. It's going to be fairly wet. It's not a total gusher though. The reason that I like to use Apache Sunset to kind of see how wet a pen is going to write is because this is one ink that changes color a lot. So if it's very light, it's going to be kind of a yellowish orange color. And if it's very heavy, it's going to be kind of more of an orange red. So this is more on the yellowish orange side. So it's not a total gusher. You know, again, this is the medium nib here. So it's going to be a little bit broader, a little bit wetter than, you know, the extra fine and the fine nib. But should give you a pretty good idea of what you're getting into. If you've ever used any of the Edison No. 5s from the Encore or any of the Edison signature line pens, it's identical to those ones. So that should help you out a little bit there and at least give you some insight to how it writes. So that's the Edison Pearlette. If you have any other questions about it or any other pens for that matter, you can always comment on my blog or on YouTube, or you can hit me up on Facebook or Twitter. Thanks so much for spending time with me today, and write on.